Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me for this episode of my random horror reviews. Today's movie is one from the year 1980. It's a horror comedy that I do feel like is fairly popular from people that have seen it before, but at the same time, I also feel like it's one that I don't often hear get brought up, so could be an interesting one, I don't know, but today's movie is titled Motel Hell, like I said, from the year 1980. This is one that I have actually briefly brought up before on my channel, but kind of only in passing. I think I said something like this was one that actually scared me a little bit when I was younger. And the weird thing is, it actually scared me before I'd seen the movie itself, which is a bit weird. I remember when I was younger in my local video rental store, seeing the cover of this one first of all, and that really creeped me out. Just something about it was a little bit freaky to me. But then I also remember a couple of times seeing the trailer for this movie play on one of the screens in the store, and that also kind of freaked me out. Which, thinking back on now, is very of the times because nowadays, well, first of all, nowadays there aren't any video rental stores, but they definitely wouldn't play horror trailers like this one in stores because of the little kids and whatever. I know trailers cut out most of the violence and scarier things, but I remember the trailer playing at least a couple of times in that store. I grew up in the early 2000s and I would have been on the younger side of things, and I remember the trailer always sucked me in but also creeped me out. But either way, moving on, before we get into my thoughts of Motel Hell, I'll quickly go into the plot for this one. So we have Farmer Vincent and his sister Ida, who run this motel sort of off in the middle of nowhere, where they farm and kill their visitors, and also people that they run off the local roads. And then they make smoked meats out of them, pretty much. But things start to become a little bit more complicated when a young lady shows up and feelings start to get involved, and then the local police, who the police officer actually is the brother to Vincent and Ida, so things start to get complicated and he's trying to put a halt to the shit going on. And there actually is a fair bit going on in this movie. You'd just sort of expect with a movie like this, it's relatively simple, but it's got a few storylines going on. So without delaying any longer, let's get into my thoughts of Motel Hell from the year 1980. Now, I kind of don't really know what vibe this movie gives off, if you were just looking at it and never seen this movie before. I have seen this movie probably a handful of times or so, but maybe to some people's surprise, this movie is a horror comedy and it's honestly pretty wacky. Before I move on, honestly, I will say I don't really find the humor in this movie to be that funny. There's only a couple of times that actually did make me laugh out loud or chuckle. One part is where these two girls accidentally walk into the slaughterhouse, so they start freaking out, and the parents are like, "Oh, what's going on?" And Vincent's like, "Oh, I'll cheer them up," and then scares the absolute shit out of him. I thought that part was actually pretty funny. And then the part where he confesses to using preservatives, I also thought that was pretty good. But otherwise, maybe a couple of other times where I smirk or, whatever. But honestly, to me, it's not overly that funny. But like I said, it is pretty quirky, and my plot description may have made it sound pretty simple, but there really is a lot going on that adds to the quirkiness. Like I said, you've got human farming, like what we have here on the cover. You've got this weird love triangle going on. You've got funky characters showing up to the motel, like this swinger couple who mistake the joint for being this like sex hotspot or whatever, which is pretty quirky in of itself. There's really is a lot going on in this movie, and like I said, it might actually catch a lot of people off guard who haven't seen this movie by the sort of tones going on in it. So with the comedy parts of this movie kind of covered and moving on, honestly, this movie still is kind of unsettling to me. It doesn't scare me as much as when I was a kid and I was like 6 or 7 or however old I was when I first came across this movie, but a lot of the stuff that I find unsettling now is sort of the stuff that did freak me out when I was a kid, because the idea of this movie, in theory, is actually pretty scary and pretty gross. You've got these people getting buried up to their necks in the dirt. Their voice boxes get all fucked with, so they're pretty much just gargling the whole time, which is really creepy. And eventually they get stripped for their meat. Firstly, something about the gargling really unsettles me. And there's other movies where that happens. Like another movie I really like is The Loved Ones. and his voice in that movie gets fucked up, and the gargling really freaks me out. And I'm not making this up. Like, I remember one time in particular when I was younger and seeing the scene where the heads are first revealed and, you know, they're all on the floor hissing and gargling and whatever. I remember laying in bed after seeing that scene and being terrified of seeing heads popping out of the carpet in my room and hissing and gargling. And something about the scenes with the neon green lights shining on them as well, like, really stuck with me, freaked me out. But something in general also makes me feel a little gross and queasy when watching this movie, even though you actually don't see anything too nasty. Everything rough is more so, you know, implied. But everything that you see in this movie is probably nothing worse than what you would see in a movie like TCM or any of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequels or anything like that. Like I brought up earlier in my plot description, there's surprisingly a lot going on in this movie. It never gets to a point where it's too overwhelming or anything like that, but there is surprisingly a lot. Like, you have the amount of quirky characters rocking up at the motel or getting taken off the roads, just different types of personalities. Like I said, you've got the swinger couple, you've got this band that get taken off the road, just some randoms and everything like that as well. But you've also got the different ways that they trick people or run people off the roads. But the thing that is thrown in as a main focus, other than the human farming and, you know, what they're actually doing behind the scenes, is the romance angle and the love triangle that's going on, which to me feels weird, not just because of who it's between, but it also feels very rushed and very, like, how? What the fuck? Like, she's been living with Vincent and Ida for maybe a week. You know, it could be that she's actually been there longer and, you know, they're just sort of relaying time or whatever, but, you know, it feels like she's been there a week and, you know, now she's fallen in love and is ready to marry him. It's like, what? But at least she becomes someone to root for, because by the final showdown between the two guys, I'm rooting kind of for neither, because the cop is annoying in this movie to me, and Vincent is a bad guy, but he's likable. So, I mean, like, who do you root for in that situation? Like, the guy that's morally good, and I say good guy, morally good, but, you know, he's still a dick. He does a lot of, you know, wrong shit in this movie. But he's more of the good guy, but he's boring. Or do you root for the guy who's a more entertaining character, but is doing the more morally fucked up shit? So she's a good character to be rooting for by the end. But the finale, yeah, I'm not in love with it. So wrapping it up, this movie is fairly entertaining, or maybe just quirky and unique enough that you just sort of can't take your eyes off it. But I mean, the story and what's going on is pretty engaging. The cast also do a solid job and bring lots of life and charisma to their performances, in particular Vincent and Ida. I just really like the brother and sister dynamic there. Even though it is a little bit creepy, and maybe it's just the mannerisms of how they get along and whatever, but it sort of freaks me out also. Like the things that they say to each other. Meat's meat and man's gotta eat, and what's the other one? It's somewhere here. It takes all type of critters to make Farmer Vincent's fritters. Just things that they say to each other, I don't know, it gives me goosebumps, but as I said, it's a good dynamic, and those two in particular bring a lot of charisma. Like, I do perfectly understand when I hear people say that they love this movie, because that's something I've heard plenty of times when people bring up this movie, is that they love this film. And for me, though, this is probably one of the more wavering movies in my collection, because sometimes I really like this movie, but then others, like today, it's just pretty good. I think I've already said on my channel, actually, that this is a movie that I always think I love. Like, people bring up Motel Hell, and I'm like, yeah, no, I really love that movie, and I always bring up the story, how it used to freak me out, and particular things that I really like. When majority of the time when I rewatch it, I'm a little bit underwhelmed. As I said, it's still pretty good, just not in love with it territory. So for a rating today, I do wish I was going to give it higher, but I'll probably just give it like a 6.5. It does have a soft spot for me. Like I said, if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably say, yeah, I fucking love Motel Hell. Something about it is just super rewatchable and whatever. Though, like I said, it's not a movie I'm in love with by any means. But if you've seen Motel Hell, let me know your thoughts of it in the comments below. Any other movies like this that you would like to recommend, let me know, because I don't know, these sort of movies do stick out to me. In a way, it kind of reminds me of American Gothic, for no reason in particular, just kind of does. It's got like that weird family sort of angle going for it, which also American Gothic has. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on Motel Hell in the comments below. And thank you for joining me for this random horror review, guys, especially if you've stuck around this long. And I'll see you for another video soon. Peace.